Now we're going to talk about variables. Variables are locations in computer memory where data can be stored or retrieved. You can think of them like 10 buckets lined up in a row. Each bucket is a variable and has its own number or address where it's located. Buckets 1 through 4 might be empty. Bucket 5 might hold a number in it, like 20. And bucket 7 might hold a word in it, like password. Let's look at this in Python to get a little bit more familiar. We'll create a new file called variables.py and open it in our favorite text editor. Now we'll create our variables. So we'll call our variable bucket1. We'll set it equal to the value 20. A little about variables in Python. To declare a variable in Python, you simply give it a name. In this case, it's bucket1, followed by an equals sign, which we see, and then a value. There's only a few rules when it comes to giving a variable a name. They can contain both letters and digits, uppercase and lowercase, but they have to begin with a letter or an underscore. It's legal to use uppercase letters, but by convention, we don't. If you do, remember that case matters, and that if we made a variable called bucket1 with an uppercase b, it's not the same as the variable bucket1 with a lowercase b. The underscore character can also appear in a name. It's often used in names with multiple words, such as my name. So if you had a variable and you wanted to call it my name, that can get a little crowded. So what you can do is add an underscore, and that's typically what people do when coding in Python. There's some situations in which beginning with an underscore has a special meaning. So if you were to do something like this, it means something special to people reading the code. It's not necessarily a rule, but more of a convention. So if you don't know what you're doing, best to just always start with a lowercase letter. We'll make another variable called bucket2. We'll make that hold the value 50. Make a third variable called bucket3, and we'll make it hold the value 3.14, so with a decimal. And then we'll make one last variable called bucket4, and we'll make it hold a string. And a string is just any combination of anything you can type. So if it's on your keyboard, it'll go. So we'll just do coffee bang. In strings, when you're coding, you want to represent a string, you always surround it in a double quote or single quote. So now we've got these four variables. Buckets 1 and 2 are of type integer. Each variable has a type. So bucket 1 and 2 are integers because they're holding values that are whole numbers or integers. Bucket 3's type is a float because it's holding the value 3.14, which is called a floating number because it has a decimal place. And then bucket 4's type is a string because bucket 4 is holding a string. Now anywhere in the code that you want to use the value 20 or 50, you can just type in the variable name instead of that value. So if we wanted to print 20, if we had code that looked like this, we could replace the 20 here with bucket 1 because bucket 1 is equal to 20. So it's the same thing as if this said 20. So let's do something where we print out the type of the variable and the variable's value here. So the way we can do that is Python has a type function. So we can print the type of bucket 1 and bucket 1's value. And just replace to do all of the variables. Looks good. Now I'll go ahead and open up another terminal so that we can see the original source code while we run it. And So we'll go ahead and run our variables file now. And you can see this statement, print type of bucket 1 and bucket 1's value, printed type integer, and the value of 20 because that's what bucket 1 holds. The same for bucket 2, bucket 3, type float because bucket 3 is holding the 3.14. 3.14 is a floating number. So bucket 3's type is float, and bucket 4 is a string holding the value coffee exclamation point. So that wraps up this video. In the next video, we'll look at operators and some of the more advanced things you can do with variables and their types.